You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
So, welcome to Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Hannah, and then how do you say your last name?
Hananamichi?
Hananamichi? Oh, so you're Hannah Hananamichi.
Yeah, but I just go by Hannah.
Well, Hannah, tell me a little bit about what you do professionally.
Oh, you mean in real life?
Yeah, real life. This is real life you're experiencing.
Well, okay, so in real life, I'm actually a clinical oncology pharmacist.
Wow.
I counsel oncology patients on their medications, and I collaborate with the doctors on their treatment. I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's quite satisfying, but sometimes it's very sad, especially when you've grown close to patients and then they pass on to the other side.
Yeah.
So, but when we find a treatment that sends them into remission, it's great.
So someone,
that's what I do.
For someone that really doesn't understand or really know too much about the field you're in, how would you explain it? Like, are you the one prescribing the medications and kind of finding the right suited, I guess, medicine requirements for the person, or?
Well, I'm the pharmacist, but I'm a little, how can I say, I'm more on the clinical side where I work with the doctors, the physicians who are the actual prescribers. I can prescribe, but it's only allowed in certain states. I collaborate with the physicians. So if I speak to the patient and the particular dose isn't working, or if it's causing certain side effects, then I can talk to the doctor, and I can get a verbal order from the doctor to change a particular medication, and then we can make it for that patient, or we can add on other medications to help with the side effects of that chemotherapy.
Do you find that it's...
Or cancer drug.
Yeah. Do you find that it's a little bit stressful doing this type of job? Like you said, not being able to help somebody if somebody passes, but also like kind of the rise, like a lot of kids my age, being around like the 20s and younger, are now experiencing higher, like, I guess, causes of opioid addiction.
Yeah. In the beginning, yes, because there weren't many treatments when I first started out. But now that we have found a lot of breakthrough treatments, a lot of our patients are living longer, and we are able to take care of their side effects better. So I'm very happy about that, and there's still a lot more work we have to do about that. But I'm very hopeful that one day we will find a cure for cancer.
Now,
we probably already have, but the insurance companies and the drug companies probably have it hidden somewhere.
All right, so you're a believer of that too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that there's probably a cure to cancer out there, but they say the number of, I guess, money they make off of cancer treatment is more than the cost, I guess, cancer cure would be. So,
of course. I mean, hey, come on.
Well, I mean, I have kind of a problem with when it comes to the education system and putting, I guess, kids on medication like ADHD and these types of amphetamines that are basically like meth. Like, they get you wired out a little bit. They get you not to really act like yourself, which is kind of the point when you experience a mental disorder. But I went to school for chemical dependency, and I kind of dived a little bit more into psychology towards the end of my year there. And I was just thinking, I was like, opioids are becoming such a major epidemic. I found that it was really weird that I had to have a license to buy cold medicine. And then I realized, oh my God, someone can make meth out of this. And I'm like, it's so weird how, like, restrictions, sooner or later, there's going to be a restriction on oranges. Like, you can't even buy oranges anymore because they found out you can make some type of drug with it.
True. There's actually certain states that will take your name and address and identification if you have to buy certain cold medications over the counter, because a lot of those ingredients are used to produce meth. But there was this conspiracy years ago where certain individuals felt that the how could I say it, the psychiatry profession was just a hoax, and that a lot of these psychiatrists were just doping up individuals for their own medical gain. I don't know how I exactly feel about that.
There is evidence of, I guess in some cases, it really depends on the clinician or the person that's diagnosing. A lot of the times, like they just prescribe a medicine off the back, and sometimes they just give a medicine just to get the patient off their back. I've talked to psychotherapists. I've talked to therapists before. I've podcasted with a few, and when it comes to prescribing medicine, it seems like everyone's kind of aware of the opioid addiction, but at the same time, a lot of it has to do with how understaffed the nursing programs are. I think it's statistic. I talked to someone that was an emergency medical assistant nurse, and who deals with all the emergency stuff, room situations, and he was like, sometimes doctors are only supposed to really have 6 patients, but some nights they have 9 or 10, and they can't sit there and talk to them, get all their information, get all their history, get a personal bond that you're supposed to have with a clinician or a doctor. And when that happens, that's where overdosing comes in. That's where, you could be allergic to something, then you get prescribed the wrong thing. And it fascinates me because the fact that we have, obviously there's natural ways of medication, either taking some type of supplement or something of this sort, but also dealing with the fact that, you can prescribe somebody methylcyptotrimine, which could be basically meth, just with a fancy name behind it.
True. Well, the thing is, unfortunately, in this day and age, coming from the healthcare industry, it's no longer about treating the patient. They now treat the patient as if the patient is a customer or a client. And it's unfortunate because not only nursing is understaffed, but all of the other professions within the healthcare are understaffed as well. As you mentioned, the doctors and nurses, but also the pharmacists, the physician assistants, the nurse practitioners. They have to see a lot more patients than what they're normally accustomed to or what the guidelines state, especially, in the hospital, if it's a urban hospital or a hospital that is being supplemented or reimbursed by Medicare, Medicaid. It's sort of like an assembly line. So if you have somebody who's coming in with a mental illness compared to someone who has, who got shot, of course, the person with the mental illness, they're just going to brush them off and send them home because they're not really an emergency in the eyes of the corporate.
Do you see that?
Idealists, they're the ones who are actually making all of the decisions, not really the doctors, not the nurses, not the pharmacists, or anybody else.
So when being kind of like a pharmacist now, do you work in the actual hospital or do you work more like in a drugstore type situation?
I actually work at a doctor's clinic.
Do you find that there are any problems that are kind of on your mind or in your kind of work that you see that need to be kind of improved? Or any areas lacking?
Unfortunately, yes, because in certain areas, unfortunately, the insurance companies, they give a really, really hard time with reimbursement, or they don't want to cover a particular procedure for a patient because it may not be cost effective in their minds. The individuals who are actually making these decisions are not healthcare professionals for the most part. And even when the doctor tries to explain to them the necessity for the particular procedure, they just refuse because it may be too much money, or also, on the hospital level, a particular patient can only get reimbursed for possibly 2 days worth of hospital stay when they should actually be in the hospital for more than that. The other problem is the fact that most of the insurance companies won't pay for home care for a patient because studies have shown that patients actually recover quicker if they're sent home with home care instead of staying in the hospital for X amount of days where they're actually subject to infection, which would keep them in the hospital for longer and which would cost the insurance company more money. So it's sort of like an oxymoron sometimes. But that's the main thing, and it's frustrating because here you're trying to treat a cancer patient. You do have the medication or you do have the procedure that can help the patient, but somebody on the other side of the phone who doesn't really have any interest or knowledge to base their facts of saying yay or nay are the ones deciding instead of the actual healthcare professionals who know exactly what they're doing. This isn't to say that there aren't other, medical care providers who are abusing the system, which we do have that, and there have been physicians who have lost their license in especially regards to the opioid crisis, where they just write for prescriptions for any Tom, Dick, and Simon, and they have lost their license, or they double bill the insurance for whatever reason for a ghost patient. So those are things you have to worry about and take into consideration too.
Do you know that, like, the story behind hospitals? Like, did you know that before we had, like, proper sanitation, hospitals were where you were basically sent to die? Like, it was basically a death sentence because of how so much contamination is. I think we've made great strides in a lot of medical development, especially when it comes to tools. I get obsessed with, I don't know if you ever heard of the surgeon Robert Liston.
Yes, I have, actually.
The fastest knife in the West End?
Yes.
Isn't I see when you hear that and you hear a guy that, like, basically doctors were relied on to be fast, like you wanted a fast doctor because you didn't have any pain medication or anything to kind of help with nulling any pain that you're facing during the surgery. So they're basically like, I want this foot chopped off. I want it done as fast as possible so I can experience as less pain as possible. See, I hear that, then I dive into the rabbit hole of Victorian surgery, all these types of innovators like Mueller, the guy that basically revolutionized the what do you call it, the what's the I'm trying to think of the name, plastic surgery, that whole thing. He revolutionized that because a lot of people don't know where the white wigs came from. The English white wigs, those giant, tall, ridiculous-looking things. A lot of people don't know that wasn't because of the royal family, that the queen just had it, so everyone thought if you had one of those, you'd be rich. Like, a lot of people think that today. The actual fact behind it was there was a disease, syphilis, which a lot of the times, especially back then, 70% of a lot of people suffered from it, and it caused giant lesions and all these giant kind of marks and skin, like just getting ripped off their body basically, and your nose practically fell off like most of the time. So, a lot of people talk about that with Michael Jackson, that like when he didn't have a nose or something, it was because he had syphilis. And the fact was, it would cause these giant lesions on top of their head, basically ripping open their scalp. So they wore these white wigs to cover it up. And I'm hearing that, and I'm like, wow, it's just so fascinating. Like, to think that before major sanitation, the reason why people wanted doctors to come to their house, where doctors do make house calls, is because they didn't want to go to the hospital because it was so much contamination there that literally you were basically getting sentenced to death.
True.
I'm sorry, I dive deep into the rabbit hole a little bit. I get fascinated. My buddy was interested in Victorian surgery, and I started looking up like everything about it, and next thing I know, I'm like an expert in it.
Oh, that's great. That's good. At least you try.
Yeah, well, I see the whole point of this podcast is to be open into what people are open to, which leads me to basically, I guess, the main thing you kind of sent me on a little bit of information about you. So you have your own podcast.
Yes, I co-host The Slot with my mate, Al, and we talk about this Australian prison drama called Wentworth. It is actually a remake of the original Aussie hit drama Prisoner Cell Block H, which started back in the late 70s.
Yeah, 1979.
And it actually ran for, 8 seasons for 692 episodes. This is the remake of it.
I actually only really saw the first couple seasons of Wentworth. I like to watch.
Oh, okay, great.
I like to watch old television a little bit, but I kind of rewatched it. Like, I guess my parents were into it, and I kind of was just sitting around the house, and I remember the show, but not like a lot of the details to it. I'm not really. I would consider myself a fan, more like I know what it's about. So for people that don't know what it's about out there, would you want to explain it? Like, how would you be able to explain it to someone who has never seen the show?
So basically the remake of Wentworth is a prison drama, an all-female prison drama, and it goes through the lives of some of the women that get caught up within the system and how they manage to live their lives and go through by being in prison. Now, it's a little bit more intense than that because it shows some of the social issues that a lot of people deal with in everyday life and life outside of prison, such as power struggles, treachery, bigotry, abuse of power, situations of rape. It mainly focuses on the women, but there are a lot of issues that relate to everybody and not just women, and that's what we really discussed on our podcast. We do go through some of the episodes, like the season 7 just finished 2 weeks ago in Australia and last week in the UK, and it's actually on Netflix in the USA. It's going to show up in Canada and also New Zealand at a later date. At this time, I'm not really privy to that, but we just go through the main issues that are affecting, because this season was mainly about mother-daughter relationship, revenge, and how certain individuals can manipulate the system to get on top.
Do you think that they're really manipulating the system, or they're finding a way around the system because the system's kind of flawed?
No, there was one individual, she was a madam, and she killed a doctor because the doctor, well, it was a heat of passion why she killed the doctor, because the doctor couldn't save her son. And this particular madam had names of high-powered officials within the government, and she wanted to use that power she had to try and force them to get her out of prison because she felt she didn't belong there. She didn't mean to kill the doctor, according to her. It was just the heat of passion, and she just wanted them to just get her out of there, so she tried to blackmail them in doing so. And it just turned into it unraveled into a lot of events. It was a high-risk roller coaster on her part, and it was exceptionally well. And one of the things with Australian drama is the fact that a lot of these actors worked together before in the past, so they have that camaraderie, and you can just see it when they're working together again, and it's so real and it's really raw. A lot of people try to compare Wentworth to Orange is the New Black, which is a hit series over here in the States, but you can't compare the two. They're so totally different.
Like, I was literally just about to compare them. So how would you say they're two completely different? Because literally when you were saying it, I was like, so it's like Orange is the New Black. And then right when you said that, I was like, thank God I didn't say that.
Yeah, no, Orange is the New Black, they focus on different issues. They focus more on the issues that are going on in America right now, like the immigration, race, drug problems, drug abuse, abuse of power, corruption within the correctional facility. Wentworth, even though they do have that, they do sometimes touch upon certain things, but their main thing is like, it's sort of like everyday life, but it's just in prison. And you just have to deal with what's going on and what's focusing around you.
Do you find it to be kind of more like a reality type thing that kind of adapts to real world scenarios a little bit.
Correct. Yes.
I think what fascinates a lot of people about reality television, like I guess a hit would be Jersey Shore, basically because that show brings a lot of tension and what's seen as a little bit fake because of the fact that when you don't have tension in your real life, you look for it somewhere else, and I find that gives people an outlet to find that tension they didn't have throughout the day.
True.
I think when you're watching like an Australian prison show, I definitely think that it's a little bit different to see how another world kind of thinks of things. I don't know if that's where you find your interest with it, because I mean I'm fascinated with at least stuff from other countries or stuff, or just being able to talk to someone from another country. Because I've podcasted with people from Romania who come here during the summer to work and then go back home, and I've podcasted with all around the world from Ukraine and everything, and generally people have the same.
Yeah, I heard some of your podcasts. They're very interesting. Europeans have a different perspective than what we do, because I actually have some relatives in Europe as well, and they look at us and they see that we have a gun control, quote unquote, epidemic here, and they can't seem to understand why we're not trying to fix it.
I think a lot of the times they look at us like we walk around fake, like we walk around with like split personalities where we're trying to display this perfect Bill or perfect Ted, whatever you want to call it, and it's not us. And I think they can see that because it's not so prevalent there. Like there are probably some people there that have it, but not everyone is seen as like a two-faced person. And I feel like it's worse here just with all the tension that's going on in our country.
I think it's just
it's a loaded question.
I will relate it to something that occurred in earlier seasons of Wentworth. People don't like confrontation. People, for the most part, don't like change, and they also don't like problems. Okay, it's very easy to live in your own bubble as long as whatever is happening around you or within the world, that it's not affecting you personally. You're just going to go about your life and do whatever it is that you want.
Do you think this
But
gives...
when it starts intrepidating, and once it starts coming onto your person or your family members or other people who you love, then that's when you're going to start to get upset, you're going to get angry, or you're going to just try to defend whatever it is that you believe in. The way you were brought up, the way you were raised, your beliefs,
your environmental
your
factors, yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with like especially how we've like this country has viewed women over like the past generations is as seen as they're not really anything more than a tool in the kitchen. I hate to phrase it like that, but that's the truth.
Yeah, but it's the truth.
Yeah,
and it's not just this country.
It's other ones too. Yeah, it's other ones.
It's a lot of countries. A lot of them feel that way. It's the culture. It's the way religion was brought up to them. Change is hard.
Well, being a woman, how do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel that, like, you feel like you don't really have a voice? Even though, like, now we're seeing major strides, but I feel like a lot of it, like, you hear a lot about riots, you hear a lot about protests, you hear a lot about feminism and all these types of things. I think it's a way for them to, I guess, try and recover all the lost time that was wasted or all the time they were kind of oppressed. I feel like it sucks that it was like that, but I feel like the way they're doing it now is just like they're trying to cram it all in last minute. Like, we've wasted all this time, there's no more time to waste, no more seconds to be. And that's where a lot of riots go on, a lot of protests, a lot of confusing things that happen. I don't know what your thoughts are on about that.
I have a lot of thoughts about it, actually. And actually, it's quite interesting because there were a couple of seasons where a woman was trying to explain that there were certain things going on within the prison that weren't right, and it was abusive to women. And one of the male officers, he just didn't believe her. He dismissed her. He put her off. In the end, it came to light that she was actually right about what she was saying. So my point is, a lot of women complain. They say certain things. There are a lot of women who stand up for their rights. There's a lot of women who stand up for women's rights. And it's good that we're being heard. It's good that certain things are trying to be done to change it. Not enough is being done. More needs to be done. But unfortunately, there are other individuals who try to undermine what's trying to be done in a positive way. And unfortunately, some of them happen to be women. Because a good example would be rape. A lot of women have been raped. A lot of women have been molested. Most of them don't want to come forward and say anything because it really doesn't matter, because the people who are actually taking the reports, the people who actually need to prosecute some of these individuals happen to be men. And of course, as a man, sometimes men, for the most part, think women are just making things up, or they probably baited the man into doing something, or the way they were dressed. You always hear that all the time. So that's kind of frustrating. And yes, there are certain women where if they get refused by a man, because I've seen it, there was one guy that I know of that lost his job because a girl came on to him and he refused her, and she lied. And back then, they didn't really have certain things. It was just one guy who was in charge. It was like, oh, really? He didn't want any controversy or mess because this particular girl said that she was going to, get the newspapers involved and all things, and he just didn't want the reputation of the place to go down or go anywhere negative. Well, he just fired the guy.
That's what happened with.
It was heartbreaking.
That's what happened with Johnny Depp.
And it angered me.
Hold on.
It angered me.
Well,
to be honest,
you have to look at another side too. That's what happened with Johnny Depp too. His wife, they didn't have a prenup, and his wife called saying that she was like Johnny Depp was attacking her, threatening her, and the cops got there. Whenever that gets said over the phone, the first thing a cop does is put the guy in handcuffs. That's what immediately happens in a domestic disturbance. That's the first thing. Is because if it's seen as a woman being attacked, that's immediately, even if it's just a thought or if it's whatever it is, if it's a claim, the guy immediately gets put in handcuffs. The weird thing was, in that case, Johnny Depp was not put in handcuffs. And a lot of people saying there's no way he hit her, like people that are best friends with Johnny Depp, there's no way. It was just a scene for a money ploy. Now, they ended up settling in court, doing all these types of things, and she ended up getting a lot of his money, a lot of his stuff. Like, it was seen that what happened where everyone said that she might just be faking it, it was true. She was faking it. I think in a lot of cases, it obviously depends on the person. It's seen as... The weird part about men and women is the fact that women, even though how powerful they are or how powerful they might not know they are, they really do. There is a sense of tension when it comes to a guy and a girl in an argument, because the factor is usually based on the looks. Mostly when a male is arguing with a female, it's seen as the male's going to become violent. The male's going to be able to hurt the female because of the size justification. Men are obviously bigger, usually, and stronger. And there's kind of a fear factor there, but women are pretty entitled, especially independent women, which I applaud for sure. I think that this isn't just about women either. It's about other things too, when it comes to race, when it comes to anything that is being oppressed a little bit, because it's not fair. You have a voice. Your voice isn't irrelevant because you are of a certain gender or a certain race. Your voice is an opinion that needs to be heard. But I think it's becoming the mainstream thing now that everyone wants to feel attacked, even though we're all really living here together and working together. And I think it's the kind of the foundation we're built upon that is a little bit unjustified or rocky.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's true. We all do deserve to be heard. We all have a voice. It's how we use that voice and what we do with that voice that try to make it count in a positive way. But as you know, there are some people out there who don't want to hear our voices. They don't want to hear anybody's voices except their own. And they have certain agendas where, only certain people should be heard. Only certain people should be respected. Only certain people are right. If somebody else says something otherwise contrary to what they believe, then you're automatically wrong, or there's something wrong with you, or they just try to undermine you and dismiss your thoughts and your feelings to the sequacious stupidity, stupid people who are out there. And it's unfortunate, but it works. It's been working all of these years. And it was seen in Wentworth many, many times because, number one, we're dealing with criminals, and criminals, according to society, don't really have a voice. So even if a criminal says something and it's true, you're going to dismiss that because they're like, well, what's their gain? And it's true, there are some criminals that were in the show Wentworth that did try and manipulate certain officers. They blackmailed them. That's why the show is so real, because things like this happen on the outside to a lot of us. I'm sure there are many things that probably happened to you where you needed something to be done, or maybe you said something the wrong way and it got taken the wrong way, but then somebody twisted it to somebody else to make it seem as if, oh my God, you're such a bad guy. Robbie, what's the matter with you?
I can't help it. I can't help it.
And you didn't say that.
I think it comes to the fact, like, it's when you're looking at, I do have a problem with at least our jurisdiction when it comes to imprisonment. Just because the fact of they're not seen as people anymore once they get that orange jumpsuit or once they get that uniform on. They're seen as just another scum to society, which is not always true, Nelson Mandela missed his funeral of his son because he was seen as a criminal. No one was giving him a chance to explain himself. It's really crazy to hear. Like, there was this one story, Christopher Ryan, he's like a PhD, kind of American history buff. But he has a podcast, and he was talking about one of his people that he knew that went into prison because of he murdered his mother. Now, he was 100%, he did not murder his mom. He did not. He was trying to explain it to everybody, but all the evidence pointed to him. And it was really weird. And then it turns out, like, later, he ended up getting dismissed after being in prison for all these years, like 20-something years. Turns out he didn't do it. And the factor was, there was a cop on the jury that literally was out to get this guy. That was like, no, he 100% did it. He didn't want to dig into any evidence, like, try and find the real killer. He was just like, nope, this is him. This is the guy. Just put him away. And so he started bringing up a bunch of falsified evidence and all these different types of things. Next thing you know, the reason why this guy got released from prison and found not guilty and found that the detective was kind of out to get him was because he tried to try him later. He said, oh, we found more evidence. And it's like, wait a minute, the case has been dismissed for 10 years now. Like, the guy's been in prison for 10 years. Where did you find more evidence? He tried to make up a lie. He ended up saying that it was a money aspect, that he killed his mother over some insurance money and hid it inside the house. Well, there were people that were living in the house when he falsified the evidence, and they were like, he never came to our house and searched. That's a lie. That dude's lying right there. So they ended up looking back into this case, and actually the detective, after saying that, got himself in even more trouble and got dismissed off the force, and the guy got released from prison. The whole factor was the lawyers that the guy had to get him out of the situation for killing his mother, he was 100% like, I did not do it. Someone killed my mom. It wasn't me. And the dad was like, there's no way he killed his mother. I know him. And everybody was kind of on his side. But the lawyer said, look, you're going to just have to plead guilty, take the less sentence, and then that'll be it. Like, it'll be kind of like a settled thing. And so he had to, like, he's sitting there and he's like, I'm not doing that. And they're asking him, usually when you kill somebody, or like, especially a family member, the first thing that happened is they have a therapist come in and they have to analyze you in case you are mentally ill. And all the therapists that kind of, I guess, interviewed him or talked to him kept highlighting on their charts that it was really weird that he was not feeling remorse. And you're like, why would he feel remorse? He didn't kill his mom.
Yeah.
And so that got him sentenced away, especially with all this fake evidence that was coming out from this guy that was literally out to get him. I think when it comes to a scenario, you have to look at both sides. Yes, the normal time it is the guy that is the person that's guilty is usually guilty. But I think a lot of the times it gets overlooked because we fall to such justifications and we don't think of the extraordinary basis. I do have a problem when it comes to security guards and all these type of wardens and prison guards that look at a prisoner as the number on their jacket, not really them as a person. Like that person could be in there for the wrong thing. Like he didn't do it. Like OJ, he didn't do it. Like I think there's a lot of weird kind of things when it comes to the law and what we consider to be, I guess, a criminal basis. Like the fact that if I label you a criminal, you can't get a job, you can't get, a bunch of things get limited to you. I think that's a wrong factor. I think that's what makes Wentworth kind of so inspiring and especially hit a lot of bases when it comes to women empowerment because of all the kind of social norms and social kind of justifications that are put on you as a woman, for being kind of underpowered, not seen as a good force or a force that is opposing or anything of that sort. You're more like seen like, all right, yeah, shut up, go over there and into the kitchen. And I hear that, and I see like pictures from the show, like women starting fires and starting riots and all conforming together. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, but they're showing the most common characteristic in all humans, and that's coming together to neutralize a problem.
Yeah. There was actually one particular character, her name was Kaz Proctor, and she actually had this idealism that she did not believe in violence against women. One thing I'm sure you already know about women, when you're in the workforce, it's a little tough to work with a lot of women because they get catty, they gossip. I mean, not that I'm saying men don't do the same thing, but men have their other agendas. But for women, it's just like somebody wants to be on top, somebody wants to rule everybody else, and then if they see there's an oddball, they try and gang up and bully on them. It's just tough when you're working with a lot of women. So this particular individual, Kaz Proctor, just didn't believe in the violence. Because, in prison, it can get violent because everybody needs to protect themselves. It's a different world in prison. It's like the animal kingdom in a way.
Yeah, well,
if you got to say that.
it's the strongest have to survive, basically, because you're the weird thing is, even around your own family, you can't be around them 24/7. You know what I mean?
Tell me
It's
something.
like, yeah, it's like after a week of seeing them every single day and being around them for like
A
basically,
week? About a day?
yeah. But
That's terrible. It could kill me.
like there's a reason why work is kind of beneficial in a way besides making money is it gets you away from your family members for a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
When you stick around,
But
like,
then at work, it's just as bad, especially when it's a lot of women. Oh, I hope none of my coworkers hear this. They'll probably kill me.
I think it's like I had a sibling that I shared a room with for a brief amount of time. And let me tell you, being around him every minute, like kind of like even when I'm trying to sleep, like he was doing something, like he was a little bit older than me. So it was more like my bedtime was earlier than his, which is kind of hard to do when you're sharing the same room. Like I'm trying to sleep up on the
Yeah.
top bunk and he's still his bedtime's in a few more hours and I'm sitting there like I'm trying to go to sleep, man. I got coloring books to finish tomorrow. And I think it's you start to notice that tension starts to happen. It's a reason why like it's really hard for couples to stick together, and the first thing they'll do before they decide to get married is usually try and live together for a little bit and see how it goes, because you start to pick up factors that you don't see just in a couple hours throughout the day. You start to see their cleanliness, you start to see how they act, like when they're tired, how they act, in different ways. It's basically getting the real person, like what they do, and try not, because you can display an act for what, maybe like a year or so, and the next thing you know, you're gonna be like, all right, look, I like to chill in sweatpants all day, and I like to fart in the open. Like you're gonna be like, what? It's like, I, I think it's like it's pretty relevant. Like even when you're dealing with a prison, You're around these people for so many hours of of every single day basically, and then you get locked into a cell with them, like being confided into a space with
Mm.
them. There's constant
Oh yeah.
tension. Is this person above me going to randomly snap, come down and hurt me? Is he gonna, you're constantly on alert, especially with the whole thing about men and men, like prisons, rape, and all these different things that happen.
Mhm.
And I think it's really, really, really crazy the fact that we can like cram what society deems the worst of the worst into the same space. Like that's the last thing you want to be
Mhm.
doing. You know what I mean?
True. But and on the flip side, the problem is if you isolate people because we're such gregarious creatures, we need to socialize,
Yeah,
or
we
else it'll deal with us on a negative aspect for our mental health.
well, a
So
lot of
it's
people
it's
don't
sort of
even
like a lose lose situation.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even understand that like solitary confinement, that should be illegal. Like that should be not a thing at all. I understand it's like, oh, it's punishment. If you put him in isolation, he learns from his mistakes. No, you don't understand the basis of solitary confinement. We all have a social skill, just like the game Sims or just like any
Mhm.
type of life game. We have a social meter. Have you ever had a really rough week and not talked to anybody, been completely introvert for maybe a month or so, and then someone just decides to randomly give you a hug or just say hello to you? It's like it's like a hug for your soul. It's like, holy crap, I didn't know I needed that. Like it gives you a recharge to your batteries. That's why I tell people, I'm like,
Yeah, I do that at work actually. Like at least once a month, I go around hugging everyone and telling them I appreciate you. I appreciate working with you. Some of them look at me like I'm effing crazy, but it's like sometimes some of them, for me, I feel like you need that because where I work, I don't really want to talk about it that much, but where I work, we see death almost all day. Somebody's coming in, they're stage four. Stage four is actually the worst kind you can get for a cancer diagnosis. That sometimes it means you can live anywhere from a week, or for some people, it can be a year or 2 years, depending on the medication and the treatment, and if we could, cut out the disease. It's like basically you're like a walking deathbed. And then some people, they're just so highly stressed because of their job, because either as a manager you have so many things to answer to, like why aren't these things being done at a certain time because there's somebody higher than you that's asking for all of these things, but yet you're a working manager where you have to get work done and you're responsible for all these people beneath you. Or if you're just the worker who you can't really keep up with what's going on because there's just so many things you have to do in the day. When you come and just give them a hug or something, sometimes some of them say, "You know what? I really needed that. Thank you." But that's what I do. So it's kind of interesting that you said that.
well, it's crazy because your environmental like factors there. Like you're being around an environment that's putting you in such a mood. It's like a wet towel. Like literally, if
Mm.
somebody dies or something, you get put in a mood like, please don't talk to me for the rest of the day, like that type of thing. I experienced that
Yeah.
when I was doing my psychology classes and we were dealing with mental health and we had to watch a hour long film of different cases, different people that were suffering with severe mental illness, whether it was schizophrenia, whether it was bipolar. It was so hard to watch them go through that. Like it was like a personal documentary. And then it was so hard to go through that and still have the mind to go out into the day and be a happy person. Like I would watch them in the morning, like on my day off or something. Next thing I know, I'm going downstairs like, wow, like I feel completely drained. Like I just had a 48-hour like marathon, and like someone in my family would go, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm gonna lay down. Nobody talk to me for a little bit. And like I would just go upstairs and lay down and I would sleep. And I was like, it's so mentally draining. Not only I can't even imagine the drain it must put on the family that's involved with that, but
Oh
watching
yeah,
this, like
a
seeing people
lot.
go through that, we don't as people naturally want to see others go through pain.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. If you get a thing or if you get like a good feeling off of watching somebody go through pain, you're probably experiencing some inner turmoil yourself. that you're trying to kind of project onto somebody else. I have a fascination when it comes to the human mind because it's so shitty but so awesome. It's just like we choose to let our crappy like notions and all these things that kind of the world kind of puts us into be displayed all the time when under the surface it's you're a diamond in the rough. You got something special about you. The fact that you're basically I mean, you're like into watching an Australian prison show. I have never heard anybody I've podcasted with or anybody I've talked to say they're into doing that and they're doing a podcast about it. That makes you one in practically a million in my book. Do you know that?
Oh, really?
I give you credit for that
Thank
because
you.
that's awesome. I think we all have something about us that makes us awesome, that makes us like interesting. You know, I've talked to a woman who has been a professional women's champion arm wrestler. I usually mention her because that's the coolest
Nice.
one in my mind. Yeah, like that's like the one I would say when I was a kid. I want to be an arm wrestling champion. My dad was like, "Shut up, you're going to school." I'm like, "But I want to be an arm wrestling champion." But then you hear people like,
Oh.
I'm interested in benefiting the minds of younger people. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, I like to help kind of kids in the education process. And I'm hearing this from a guy that's sitting across from me, big dude, like alpha male, if you've ever heard of the word alpha male. And he's just
Yeah.
like, I really want to help children kind of overcome their like fears as kids. And I also want to be able to educate them to understand the world is a wonderful place. I'm like, oh my God, you want to be a kindergarten teacher and you look like how you do? And he has like a tattoo and stuff. And sometimes the people you wouldn't even think, just because you choose to judge a book by its cover, have something really
Yep.
weird or quirky about them that makes them so damn interesting.
Yes, this is true. I do have a question for you, though. How many seasons have you seen of Wentworth, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh God, I
Or
can't.
if you just saw a couple of episodes of the first season?
I think I've probably seen like a couple episodes from the first and a couple episodes from another season. Like I said, I was kind of watching it as a little kid, like for maybe like 5 minutes because I
Okay.
was making a sandwich or something, and my mom was like addicted to the TV.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're really fascinated by the mind and psychology and things of that nature. There's a character in season 2 where she debuts as the governor of Wentworth, and her name is Joan Ferguson. So a lot of people know her and they hate her character. Unfortunately, a lot of fans, they can't separate the character from the actor. So they hate on Pamela Rabe, who is the actress, and she's actually a 60-some-odd-year-old lady, wonderful woman. I've met her before. She's very cultured. She's very refined. She's excellent in her craft. The way she plays this particular character, Joan Ferguson, she's a complete psychopath. And I think her character would probably interest you the most because her character is so dynamic, she's so diabolical, and throughout her disease, she is completely brilliant.
You know, what's funny is that is really the basically what do you call it? That is the same kind of relation to, you ever hear about Johnny Lawrence?
Yes.
The guy from Karate Kid, the bad guy, and everyone sees him now
Yeah.
and just hates him because they think of the guy that broke the Karate Kid's leg and try to push him down. I think it's kind of crazy when you get an actor that is so fit for the role that they play it so well that you literally cannot define that person as anything but that role. Like even in their real life, like he's not Johnny to anybody. He's the guy that broke the Karate Kid's leg. Like he's the guy that was like the worst villain in any like type of movie that was like really revolutionary, especially at the time, being the Karate Kid. Like the same thing you're talking about with the governor. People can't unconnect that actor role. They're like, that's the enemy. Like there's someone that like everyone just hates them. And it's like, but that's not how that person really is though. And it's like, I don't care. In my
No, she's the complete opposite, actually, in real life. She's so nice and so sweet, and she's actually really shy, I heard. and very soft spoken, so nice. But
Do you-
on the other twist, the protagonist of the story, B. Smith, like everybody loves her too, and I've met her in person as well, and she is so dynamic, and she's like the party girl. She's the one you want to go out and party with and drink and dance and have fun with. She's just so awesome, whereas Miss Rabe is the type of lady you'd like to go to the theater and have, like, you know, a nice little dinner and talk about books that you read for the week or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have two different people, but it's like there are some fans that just see B. Smith, a.k.a. played by Miss Danielle Cormack, who is a wonderful actress, too. I love her. She's great. They only see her as B. Smith, even though she's played in hundreds of other roles. I don't know if you ever heard of Xena,
Yeah.
the warrior princess. Yeah, Epiphany is Danielle Cormack.
What?
That's who she was. Yes. That is Danielle Cormack.
I'm gonna have to
Back
look
in
at
her day when
Wentworth
she
now.
couldn't speak American English, Xena, she'll kill me if she ever heard me make fun of her like that. Yeah, that's her.
I think it's amazing how, like, something like so impactful, just like a movie, just basically a script, like created writing or creating performance, can be so powerful that we can make a justification on somebody. Like, you know, the story behind Will Smith choosing his name for the Fresh Prince?
No.
The director was
Tell
like,
me.
I want you to pick a name that you're going to be okay with people knowing and basically calling you and recognizing you as you for the rest of your life. So he picked Will Smith. He was like, I want people to know me like my name, Will Smith. And that's what they did. Like, you don't know Alfonso as Alfonso. You know him as Carlton on The Fresh Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, I even say, hey, you're doing the Alfonso. They're like, what do you mean? This is the Carlton. I'm like, that's Alfonso. Like, nobody knows his name because everyone justifies him as Carlton. I think it's because there's some movies and some shows that are so, like, powerful and so awesome, like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, at least especially in developmental years. Like, for me, that was on my TV list going to school in the morning. Like, I was like, now this is the story all about, and I would just go into it.
Yeah,
And
I used to like that too, actually.
Yeah, and then you hear that and you're like, that's so crazy that something can be so impactful just from a movie or a TV series. And that's what a lot of people need to understand. Like, your fascination with Wentworth is also because it made relatable experiences to being a woman and feel like you're not able kind of to be heard. You know, whether you kind of developed it in your past or whether you kind of see it more played out throughout your life. Like, a lot of why people get addicted to a certain series or a certain show or get all fascination and become a major super fan, whatever you want to call it, is because they're being able to relate to this thing where they're not really be able to relate to anything else. Like, find a connection.
True. Actually, this season was supposed to be the last season, but because of the fans and their petition writing, we managed to get 2 more seasons, so that's a great thing. So our podcast will still be going. The other thing about our podcast will probably separate us from another podcast, because there is one out in Australia who she's just all about Wentworth, but after a certain character died off, which was her favorite, she became a little despondent and negative about it. We are still going to follow a lot of the actors, past, future, and present, in the shows that they have upcoming and some that they did in the past. So, like I was talking about Governor Joan Ferguson, her real name is Miss Pamela Rabe. She's actually doing something currently called The Hunting. It's on BBC, and it's also showing in Australia, and it's basically about child pornography and what students are doing nowadays by posting nude pictures of their girlfriends and friends online, and how the families and the school deal with those situations.
Yeah, you get in major trouble if you do something like that. I mean, honestly, you shouldn't be sending pictures of yourself at all that you wouldn't want them to get out there. Like, to be honest, like, that
Well,
one...
that's the thing, because I actually watched I managed to get to watch one of the episodes today, and one of the girls, who happens to be an Indian girl, and you do know that their culture is they're very conservative when it comes to dating and things of that nature. She likes a boy, and she only sent a picture to him for his eyes only. And the young boy, and now this is based in Australia actually, and the young boy, he likes her, but he has a friend who is a Caucasian Australian, and this friend, it seems like he comes from a well-to-do family, so he's kind of spoiled, and he feels like he can do things his way, and he was egging on the young man, like, you're just wasting your time with this girl. She's not going to give up anything to you. She's not going to show you anything, blah, blah, blah. So I guess to show him that he was wrong about this girl, he sent the picture to him. And this guy said, oh, my God, she's so hot. But unfortunately, the girl that he liked, I guess she's a little more like a feminist. She's more about girls' rights and things of that nature. And his friends were telling him, like, this girl, forget her. She's just going to make you look bad, and she's going to probably turn you into a wuss. So what this guy did was, not only did he take her picture because she did some masturbation on the webcam with him, and he was recording it without her knowledge, he took pictures. He posted it on some website along with the Indian girl and called them sluts. So now all the kids see this at school. So the next few episodes, it's just a 4-part miniseries, and me and another co-host are going to talk about it because my partner, I think it touches him to the bone, which he doesn't really want to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about that. And I think it's something that needs to be spoken about because it's really tough. It's deep issues.
You know what I find really, really fascinating? You ever heard of the cucking stool?
I've heard of it, yes.
It was used commonly, like women imprisonment, where they would basically have a bunch of guys dipping a woman into freezing cold water. Like, I think there's a fascination a little bit. Like, I've read stories, obviously it's not just a justification for women, but, I've read stories, especially, like, in my British literature class, there was a poem about, or really, like, kind of a tale, that really played around murder of a loved one in the house. It was this old farmer, and it turned out the wife did it. And it was only because it was actually really fascinating. You might actually, if I think of the name of it, but you might find it interesting because it kind of hits a little bit about the kind of the history behind like Cell Block H, the hairdresser that that killed her abusive husband.
Yeah.
It was basically, the story went on about like they found this farmer that was dead in his bed, and they were like, he didn't die of a heart attack though because he had a rope wrapped around his neck. So this is back like a couple, maybe like let's say 1900s. So it's kind of, they thought maybe he killed himself, and it was like, but why was he in his bed at the time? He looked like he was strangled. And what happened was, it turns out these two women actually solved the case before the male detectives did. It basically highlighted the men as big buffoons that didn't see the real picture. They came to the conclusion, at least the detectives did, that the woman did it, the wife did it, and the other wives of the neighborhood knew her and knew that that's what happened, but the detectives didn't look at least the guy detectives did not look at the real evidence of what happened in the case, and that was because they didn't know the history of the woman behind her. Like the fact that she was being abused by her husband, she was treated like crap. She only connected to this bird that she had, a little mockingbird that she had inside her little cage that was in her house. That the guy would always say, "You love that bird more than you love me." And it's about a 100-page story. It's a really interesting read, especially if I'm 21. I'm pretty sure you'd probably find it pretty fascinating too. And so I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, like it's a really deep understanding, like at least like justifications that people make. So the husband ended up killing the bird by snapping its neck, and the woman, she lost her son, went off to war, like, so she didn't see her son anymore, And so she bonded with a bird, much like how older people do. They usually get a dog once their kids leave because they still feel the need to take care of something. And the husband was like, "You spend more time with that bird than you do with me," and then he killed the bird. Next thing you know, the husband's dead, and the woman, like, she was already so heartbroken over her bird that she felt like,
Yeah.
you just killed my bird and you already abuse me every single day. Now you can look at that in two aspects. One, she thought she might be next, or two, she realized, like, you have taken everything I love from me and you're not someone that I truly love anymore. And she was like, I need to end this, because nobody was listening to her. She was only able to kind of
Yeah.
complain, and then eventually she stopped hanging out with her neighborhood wife friends. Like, instead of having wine night or whatever, or having book club, she started missing the book club meetings. She started, like, not showing up. She started not talking to him anymore, just because her husband was like, get inside the house, like that type of thing. And the two neighborhood wives solved the case before the detectives did, and truly knew the basis behind it, and didn't even say anything, because they were like, we understand where she was coming from. She was abused. She was put in this scenario that she wasn't comfortable with, and she felt like this was her only choice.
Yeah.
Well,
you see, back then, abuse and physical violence against women, it was just something that, it was a norm, let's put it that way. It was stuff I'm assuming that, nobody really spoke about, because you would be deemed as unfit as a wife, or you would just be, or casted out from society, because, the husband, the patriarch, he's the bread and butter winner. He's the one who makes all the decisions in the house, and you have to be the submissive wife, especially since, a lot of it was based off of Christianity, where the woman is supposed to be submissive to the husband. She's supposed to listen to everything and anything he says. And, if you go against what he says, then, you're going to have to face the consequences. I mean, I've had relatives and friends, too, that I'd hear them complain, and an older generation individual would tell them, well, what did you do wrong, to the female, instead of saying, well, can't you two work it out, or, the man is at fault. You'd never hear that. It's always the woman's fault. Like, well, what did you do wrong? You're going to have to change yourself. The woman always has to change herself, but the man can still be himself, because, he's a man, and that's what men do. And even in society now, it's still that way. Like, that's just how men are. And, like that guy Kavanaugh, when he was doing his drunken escapades, and it's okay for him to do that, but if a woman did that, God forbid, she's not fit to hold office or anything like that. So, I mean, times are changing for the better. It's something that we have to keep on going, but, you have to understand that there's a lot of things that undermine what changes we're trying to do, and unfortunately, when not everybody's on board, it's always going to be an uphill battle.
I think it's never going to I think it's getting better for sure, but it's never truly going to end when we have justifications or classifications on certain jobs that are based, like, that's a man's job, that's a woman's job. It doesn't even, and it's not limited to that. It's also, you have to be white to get that job. You have to be black to be that. It's like, when you start making justifications along that line, you really start crossing a boundary when it comes to human rights. Like the fact that we're all people. It doesn't matter what gender you are, what race you are. I think the only box you should have to check on a census test is I'm not a robot or I am a robot. Because those are the only two things that are really going to matter into the future, at least with how fast technology is developing to creating artificial life and these types of things. But I think when it comes to the concept, like, the president, for example, everyone was so for Hillary Clinton, even though she was so wrong and, like, lied about a bunch of stuff, because they wanted a woman president. Now, I'm pro woman president for sure. I'm pro any president that feels like they can do the job right. But it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a guy. We have not had a candidate that is fit to be the president. I think it's a stupid and ridiculous job in the first place. You know, one of my biggest influences, especially with comedy, is Joe Rogan because he has a bit about the president. Like, it's not a job for a man or a woman. It shouldn't even be a job for anybody. It should be a number of people that are involved in it. Giving one person all the power to run the country, like, that is ridiculous. You can't put that on a guy's shoulders, and you can't put that on a woman's shoulders. Like, it's a stupid, ridiculous notion because the fact is, one person cannot govern millions or billions of people.
Oh, so other people would disagree with you on that. I mean, look at Queen Elizabeth. Oh my
That's
God!
England people. That's from England.
That have gone on for centuries.
But even they don't do it right.
If we were just to have one person who is to be in charge, it'd be the same. And the other problem is if you have more than one person that's in charge, the problem is everybody wants to rule the world.
We all have.
I mean, here's a good example. Look at Moscow Mitch, right? How many gun laws that have been sent to his office and he stalled or blocked them or something after recession? I mean, after their little holiday, they're going to get together and talk about something and try to pass something. But I'm sure basically how it always goes, somebody gets shot and killed, they make a protest or they complain. These guys wait until it blows over. They'll claim that they're going to do some little thing, and then it'll just go back to the way it was.
We're living by old
it's worked
rules.
All of these years, it's still working.
We're living by old standards and old rules. In a society, in a world that wants innovation and wants to procrastinate into the future, we're still living off kings and queens. Like, the fact that that's a thing still is like, it was wrong at first. No one liked any of the justifications King Henry did. Nobody liked any of these types of things. Nobody likes anything Obama did. Everybody has a complaint about the president, either one. Everyone always thinks about, like, JFK, he was such a visionary, he should have kept on going. Yeah, but he did a lot of things wrong too. Nobody does it right. It's because you can't please everyone. You can't do that. It doesn't happen. There's always someone that's going to be willing to throw in their hat, throw in their little complaint, and run with it, and people are going to agree with it.
And that's one of the reasons why they want just one person to be in charge, because you're not going to make everybody happy. It just doesn't work that way. You're going to have the yays, you're going to have the nays, you're going to have those who are, like I said, intellectually hungry, and then you're going to have those who have too much intellect, but they just don't want to be bothered with all the politics going on. And that's just how life is, and that's why they want one person on ahead making all the decisions, and we either go with it or we don't. The majority rules.
What do you think changes you would say that society could benefit from, like any types of things they could do to kind of help with increasing, I guess, more rights for everyone and stop deeming people just on the classification of gender or race? I love that you sighed after that because it is a loaded question.
Well, yeah, I have to think about that because it's not just a one-pot question. The issue mainly is the fact that those who have should not be afraid to allow others to try and strive to have. I've been seeing with a lot of the people who are anti-immigration, and they say, we don't have enough room for all these people that are going to come. They're going to mess up our way of life. They're going to take our jobs. They're going to burden the healthcare system even more than it already is with, wanting stuff for free. The same reason why people migrate to certain areas is because they want to have a better life. I think once we understand the fact that we all can coexist, we just have to have mutual respect for each other, then things can change. But that will never happen because, unfortunately, a lot of us were raised to believe that we're more superior than other individuals, or if we start sharing, it'll be either socialism or communism, and we don't want that. We want free enterprise. We want you to work hard for what you have, even though a lot of these billionaires, in order for them to work hard, they're using people to work hard and pay them less than what they deserve.
Well, you know what?
So I think it's mutual respect. That's basically what it is.
I literally couldn't say it any better myself. You know, it's all about respecting one another, and that's what I really try and do with this podcast. You being able to come on for just an hour and be able to explain your reasoning and your passion a little bit, and like kind of just giving me a little bit of your experience has benefited me in such a bigger way. I think more people need to understand that we're all living here together, and we need to take time to know at least one another a little bit more, even if it only takes an hour. Like, how much of your time of your day are you really just sitting around doing nothing? Like, there is points in your life that you have time to do stuff, you just don't feel like it. I think we need to be more motivated to learn about one another's. Whether, if I just get off work and I decide I'm going to jump into a podcast or something, I'm 100% for it, even if I'm tired, because I rather expand my knowledge than spend any time wasting not exploring all possible things.
Well, I want to thank you too, Robbie, for having me, because actually for a young person, you're very learned and you're very open-minded. We don't see a lot of that these days. I mean, there are some people who claim that they are, but once you start talking to them and then you get into the real nitty-gritty issues, especially issues that make your skin crawl or uncomfortable, people start to deflect or talk about something else, or they just don't want to get into it. And that's really good, because I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts, and I have to say that you're really good. I enjoy listening to you. I enjoy your thought process, and to be honest with you, a lot of the younger generation, if they become as learned or half as learned as you are, this world will become a better place. Listen to me, I'm talking like I'm some old lady. I'm 27. Thank you.
Well, let me just say, I really appreciate that, because it means a lot, because I think I'm trying my hardest to be more open-minded, and especially in the world today, like I see a lot of people that are experiencing the same kind of pain and same kind of things as others, and I've experienced my fair share too. And I'm not. That's not, who's experienced more pain. It's not a contest. I think we all need to understand that we're all here together, and it makes sense to learn about one another. And I really appreciate you coming onto my podcast, especially being so cooperative with just like some kind of technical difficulties, and the fact that we still were able to get this conversation, and I'm so glad and I'm so fortunate that you were able to do this, and I want to thank you, really.
Oh, it was my pleasure, anytime. And I'm of course going to ask you to come on my podcast too, because we need your insight to the psychological makeup of the freak. So when we discuss Joan Ferguson, you have to come on and talk about it.
Hey, I'm down.
That means you have to watch season 2.
Well, it looks like I already got something I have to go pull up on YouTube or Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. It's on Netflix.
Well, I guarantee you I'm pulling it up right after this podcast is over with. I'm definitely going to educate myself. I'm willing to help. I'm willing to be on the podcast for sure, because it's something I want to learn a little bit more about. It looks like a really interesting show, and the fact that it's in my memory, but it's like glimpses and pieces of bits of episodes. I'm like, what is this thing that someone in my family was addicted to watching back in the day that I don't know anything about?
Well, the show isn't that old. Wentworth isn't that old. I'm thinking probably whoever the family members are, they were watching Prisoner. So Prisoner was really old time, and Prisoner was actually really good. But Wentworth is fast forward to today's modern day, and I'm telling you, it's really worth your time. For me, Orange is the New Black was for me in the beginning, because my workmate was the one who introduced it to me, and I thought it was like better than sliced bread. And on Netflix, sometimes they give you suggestions, and I saw Wentworth, and I'm like, forget this, because I don't like Australian people. Because when I went to South Africa, I had some run-ins with some rather obnoxious Aussies, and I'm like, you know what, you people are just nasty and rude. And then when I looked up Australia a little bit, I saw that they had like the whole indigenous problem, and they separate the children from the families because they feel that, the Caucasian Australians will probably give the indigenous children a better life. So then the children forget about their culture. They don't know anything about their history and background. And plus, they're also anti-immigration. They're homophobic over there. They're racist over there. That was my general knowledge of Australians at the time. So I was like, you know what? Just forget this show. I don't want to know anything about Australia. I don't want to see anything concerning Australia. Australia can go to fuck. Are we censored here? Because sometimes that does get ahead of me.
No, you're good.
I do apologize.
I want you to be as real as you want. I want you to be as real as you want.
Oh, okay. So that was my thing. And then when Orange... So I delayed watching the show for probably 2 years. And then, because I was binge watching Orange is the New Black. And so when finally I finished and caught up with Orange is the New Black, I didn't have anything else to watch. And this was 3 years ago. So I'm like, this show again? What the fuck? So I figured, all right, let me just watch it. And from episode 1, I was like, oh my God, what the hell?
Yeah.
There was an older lady, Jax Holt. She was the one who was running the prison. She was just, oh my God, it was just, oh Lord have mercy. And I said, I like this show. My God, I wasted all this time and I didn't watch it. And then I just started looking for the Facebook groups. I started friending people. And then when season 2 came along and I saw Joan Ferguson and she scared the living daylights out of me. Joan Ferguson is actually the female's version of Hannibal Lecter.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And I love Hannibal Lecter. Oh my God. Silence of the Lambs, that was my show. I'm like, this guy, he's so brilliant. You know what I mean? It's like, even though he's a psychopath, he's crazy, and he himself was also a psychiatrist, and just the fact that he learns about his prey the way he does before he actually kills them. Like Anthony Hopkins, he's like one of my all-time favorite actors. I love that man to death. If I could marry him, I would. But Joan Ferguson's character was the complete female version of this guy. So that's the type of fear this woman instilled in everybody, and the acting was just superb. And I was just, oh my God, I couldn't. I just love the show after that. And then there are other actors within the show that are just as great. I mean, Nicole De Silva, who plays Frankie Doyle, that all the women said that they'll turn gay for her, even though she herself is not gay. She's a great actress. I mean, there's just so many of them.
There's so many benefits to the show.
Celia Ireland, who plays like the mother, Liz the Birdworth, she had alcoholism problems, and it was a lot.
There's just so much benefits to the show. I definitely am going to look it up so I can get a little bit of reference to when I become a guest on your podcast for sure. Because
yes.
I'm into it. It sounds like it's something interesting I can get into, and I always tell people, like, you cannot make justifications without experiencing something for yourself. I can't take anything anybody says without experiencing both sides.
True.
So I really appreciate you being on my podcast. It was an honor having you, and I want everyone to go check out your podcast. It's called The Slot.
Yes.
And it was awesome having you.
The Slot, you can find us, The Slot, on Instagram. We have a Facebook group called The Slot also. We're on Twitter. So you can also catch our podcast on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, who knows what else. But,
most platforms.
You think Al has a British accent, so if those of you who, like that type of accent, you can go check him out with that accent. And then there's me, boring me, okay. And
awesome,
we
you.
sometimes have other guests too. Like we actually interviewed 2 of the main characters on the show when we went to the convention a few months back. Well, it wasn't a convention, it was an event where we got to have round table with the actresses, and we got to talk to them about certain things, and then we sidebarred with them too, and that was pretty exciting. So, you know.
There's so many interesting things, and I mean, you can't go wrong listening to a podcast with a guy that has a British accent. Let me tell you, it's something that'll serenade you to sleep like Morgan Freeman. Well, you know what, Hannah? I appreciate you being on my podcast, and I'm excited to be on yours. And I think it's awesome that you have like this passion for, especially something that a lot of people just don't even want to take time into learning about. Which I'm going to go right now to Netflix and start watching some stuff.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Robbie, for having me.